The fluorescent lights of FreshMart grocery store hummed overhead as 8-year-old Maya clutched her precious birthday candy, a single chocolate bar her family had saved weeks to afford. Behind her in line stood Victoria Chen, CEO of Chen Industries, worth $3 billion, desperately trying to calm her screaming 2-year-old daughter. What happened next would shatter every assumption about kindness, privilege, and the power of a child's pure heart. Maya turned around, looked at the crying toddler, and without hesitation, made a choice that would echo through both their lives forever. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button for more real, emotional, life-changing stories like this, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The morning had started like any other Tuesday at the Chen household, except Victoria felt the familiar weight of guilt pressing against her chest as she rushed through her penthouse apartment, checking emails, while simultaneously trying to get her daughter, Emma, ready for another day with the nanny. The marble floors reflected the weak Seattle sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and Victoria caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, her tailored navy suit perfectly pressed. Her black hair pulled back in a severe bun that had become her signature look in boardrooms across the country. Emma sat in her high chair, refusing to eat the organic oatmeal that cost more than most families spent on groceries in a week. "Mama," she whimpered, reaching her tiny arms toward Victoria, who was already mentally rehearsing her presentation for the afternoon board meeting. The acquisition of 3 manufacturing plants in the Midwest hung in the balance, and Victoria's shareholders expected nothing less than perfection. "Mrs. Chen, shall I take Miss Emma to the park today?" asked Rosa, the nanny who had been with them for 6 months, longer than any of the previous caregivers who had come and gone like seasons. Victoria nodded absently, kissing Emma's forehead before grabbing her briefcase and heading toward the elevator. The day unfolded in its usual pattern of conference calls, strategic planning sessions, and the relentless pursuit of profit margins that had built her empire from the ground up. Victoria had clawed her way from a working-class neighborhood in San Francisco to the pinnacle of corporate success, and she wore her achievements like armor against a world that had taught her early that vulnerability was a weakness. Her own mother had worked 3 jobs to keep their family afloat, and Victoria had sworn she would never experience that kind of financial insecurity again. But at 4:30 that afternoon, Rosa called with panic in her voice. Emma had developed a fever and seemed unusually fussy. "She keeps asking for you, Mrs. Chen. I think she might need her mama today." Victoria felt the familiar tug-of-war between duty and motherhood, between the empire she had built and the little girl who needed her. She canceled her evening meetings, something that would have been unthinkable just a year ago, and drove home to find Emma listless and warm in Rosa's arms. The pediatrician's office was booked solid, but Dr. Martinez agreed to see Emma if Victoria could bring her in immediately. Victoria found herself in an unfamiliar position, standing in a crowded waiting room filled with crying children and exhausted parents, her designer heels clicking nervously against the linoleum floor. She felt completely out of place among the soccer moms in yoga pants and the working fathers still wearing their construction boots. After confirming that Emma had a mild ear infection, Dr. Martinez handed Victoria a prescription and some gentle advice about childhood fevers. "Sometimes they just need extra cuddles from Mama," he said with a knowing smile that made Victoria's chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't quite name. As they left the medical building, Emma's fever broke slightly, but she remained clingy and whimpering. Victoria realized they needed children's acetaminophen and decided to stop at the closest grocery store rather than driving across town to the upscale market where she usually shopped. FreshMart was a revelation to someone who typically had groceries delivered by personal shoppers. The aisles were crowded with families, clearly stretching their budgets, children helping their parents compare prices, and the kind of everyday life that Victoria had insulated herself from for years. She navigated the pharmacy section with Emma growing increasingly fussy in the shopping cart, drawing stares from other customers as the toddler's cries echoed through the store. Victoria felt heat creeping up her neck, not from embarrassment about the noise, but from the realization that she had no idea how to comfort her own daughter in public. At home, she could hand Emma to Rosa or retreat to her office, but here, surrounded by strangers, she was forced to confront her own inadequacy as a mother. The checkout lines were longer than anything Victoria had experienced in years. She chose what appeared to be the shortest queue, positioning herself behind a Hispanic family with 3 children. The mother, Maya Gonzalez, wore scrubs that suggested she worked at a hospital or clinic, and her husband David had paint stains on his work shirt and calloused hands that spoke of manual labor. Their oldest daughter, Maya, stood quietly beside them, her dark hair braided with colorful ribbons that looked handmade. Maya held a single chocolate bar in her small hands, turning it over and over as if it were made of gold. Victoria overheard fragments of conversation between the parents in hushed Spanish, something about overtime shifts and a birthday celebration being postponed until payday. The family's card contained the basics: milk, bread, rice, beans, and a few vegetables, nothing frivolous except for Maya's lone candy bar. Emma's crying intensified as they waited in line, and Victoria felt the familiar panic that accompanied these public episodes. She tried bouncing the toddler gently, offering her phone to play with, even attempting to sing a lullaby she remembered from her own childhood, but nothing seemed to work. Other customers were starting to stare, some with sympathy, others with barely concealed irritation at the disruption. Maya turned around at the sound of Emma's distress, her large brown eyes immediately focusing on the crying child with concern rather than annoyance. "Mama," she whispered to Maria, tugging on her mother's scrubs, "the baby is sad." Maria glanced back at Victoria with understanding, remembering her own struggles with fussy children in public spaces. "See, mija? But we should mind our own business," Maria replied softly in accented English, hoping Victoria wouldn't take offense. She had learned through experience that well-to-looking people often didn't appreciate unsolicited attention to their parenting struggles. But Maya's heart was pure and uncomplicated by adult social conventions. She watched Emma's red, tear-stained face and felt a genuine urge to help. Maya remembered how she felt when she was sad, how small gestures of kindness could transform even the darkest moments. She looked down at her birthday chocolate bar, the one treat her parents had managed to afford after weeks of careful budgeting, and made a decision that would ripple through multiple lives. Without seeking permission from her parents, Maya stepped out of line and approached Victoria's shopping cart. "Excuse me," she said in her clear, childish voice. "Would your baby like some candy? It always makes me feel better when I'm crying." She held out her chocolate bar with both hands, as if presenting a precious gift to royalty. Victoria stared at the child in shock, taken completely off guard by this unexpected gesture of generosity. In her world of calculated business dealings and strategic relationships, genuine altruism was rare, especially from children who clearly had so little to give. "Oh, sweetie, that's very kind, but she's too young for chocolate," Victoria managed to say, her voice thick with emotion she didn't fully understand. Maya nodded seriously, as if this information made perfect sense. "Maybe she could just hold it? Sometimes when I'm sad, just holding something special makes me feel better, even if I can't eat it right away." The wisdom in her words struck Victoria like a physical blow. This 8-year-old understood comfort and emotional support in ways that Victoria, despite all her education and success, had never quite grasped. "Maya, come back here, mija," Maria called gently, mortified that her daughter was bothering the obviously wealthy woman. "I'm so sorry," she said to Victoria. "Children don't understand boundaries sometimes." But Victoria found herself kneeling down to Maya's eye level, something she rarely did even with her own daughter. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked, ignoring Maria's embarrassment. "Maya Isabella Gonzalez," the girl replied with dignity, still holding out her chocolate bar. "Today is my birthday, and this is my special candy, but I think your baby needs it more than I do right now." The words hit Victoria like a physical force. This child was willing to give up her only birthday treat to comfort a stranger's crying toddler. Victoria's throat tightened as she realized she was witnessing a level of selflessness that her corporate world had trained her to view as naive weakness, but which she now recognized as profound strength. "Maya, that is the most beautiful offer anyone has ever made," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't let you give up your birthday candy. That wouldn't be fair to you." Maya tilted her head, considering this with the serious expression of a child trying to solve an adult problem. "My mama says that when we share good things, they become even more special. Maybe we could break it in half? Then the baby could have some when she's bigger, and I could still have some too. Before Victoria could respond, Emma suddenly stopped crying, apparently fascinated by the conversation happening around her. She reached out from the shopping cart toward Maya with chubby fingers, making the soft cooing sounds she usually reserved for her favorite stuffed animals. Maya giggled and wiggled her fingers back at Emma, creating an instant connection between the two children. "Look, Mama," Maya called to Maria. "She likes me." Maria approached hesitantly, still uncertain about how to navigate this unexpected interaction with someone who was clearly from a very different social class. "Mrs. I'm sorry, I don't know your name." "Victoria." "Victoria Chen." She stood up, extending her hand to Maria with genuine warmth. "And please, don't apologize. Your daughter is remarkable. She has a good heart," Maria agreed, pride evident in her voice, despite her continued discomfort with the situation, sometimes too good for her own benefit. Victoria found herself studying this family more closely. Maya's clothes were clean but clearly second-hand, carefully mended in places where the fabric had worn thin. Her shoes were slightly too big, probably bought with room to grow. But despite the obvious financial constraints, there was something radiant about this child, a joy and generosity that seemed to emanate from within. "Would it be all right if I bought Maya a new chocolate bar?" Victoria asked Maria. It seems wrong for her to give up her birthday treat. Maria's face flushed with a combination of gratitude and embarrassment. "That's very kind, but you don't need to do that." Maya chose to offer, and we want her to understand the meaning of her choices. Victoria nodded, respecting the family's dignity, but she was already forming ideas that went far beyond a simple candy bar replacement. She watched as Maya continued to make faces at Emma, who was now giggling and clapping her hands. The transformation in her daughter was remarkable. Victoria realized she hadn't seen Emma this happy and engaged with another person in months. The line began moving forward, and Victoria found herself wishing it would slow down. She wasn't ready for this encounter to end, though she couldn't articulate why. There was something about Maya's unself-conscious kindness and Maria's quiet dignity that made Victoria want to understand their lives better. As they approached the cashier, Victoria overheard Maria quietly telling her husband in Spanish that they might need to put back the ground beef they had planned for dinner, as Maya's prescription for her asthma inhaler had cost more than expected. David nodded without complaint, reaching into the cart to remove the package of meat. Victoria's heart clenched as she watched this family navigate financial decisions that she hadn't had to consider in over a decade. She remembered her own childhood, when her mother would stand in similar lines, making similar calculations, choosing between protein and vegetables, between her children's needs and her own desires for small luxuries. Without thinking, Victoria touched Maria's arm gently. "I couldn't help but overhear. Please, let me pay for your groceries today. It would mean a great deal to me." Maria's eyes widened in shock, and she shook her head immediately. "Oh no, we couldn't accept that. Thank you, but we manage just fine." "I'm sure you do," Victoria said quickly, recognizing the pride in Maria's response. "I didn't mean to imply otherwise. It's just that Maya offered such a beautiful gift to my daughter, and I'd like to offer something in return. Please think of it as a birthday present for Maya." Maya looked up at this exchange with confusion, not fully understanding the financial dynamics at play, but sensing the emotional weight of the conversation. "Mama, can the nice lady be my friend?" she asked with the directness that only children possess. Before Maria could respond, they reached the cashier, a tired-looking teenager who began scanning their items with practiced efficiency. Victoria watched as the total climbed higher than she had expected for such basic groceries, a reminder of how inflation affected families living paycheck to paycheck. Maria pulled out a worn wallet and began counting bills carefully, while David checked their cart once more to make sure they hadn't forgotten anything essential. Maya stood between them, still clutching her chocolate bar and occasionally waving at Emma, who continued to gurgle happily in response. Victoria made a decision that surprised even herself. When the cashier announced the total, Victoria stepped forward and handed over her credit card before Maria could pay. "Please," she said simply. "Let me do this." Maria's eyes filled with tears of frustration and gratitude. "Mrs. Chen, we are not charity cases. We work hard for what we have." "I know you do," Victoria replied with gentle firmness. "This isn't charity. This is one mother helping another, and one person trying to say thank you for the most beautiful act of kindness I've witnessed in years." The cashier looked between the two women uncertainly, unsure whether to process Victoria's payment or wait for further instruction. Maya tugged on Victoria's jacket and looked up at her with serious eyes. "Mrs. Victoria, are you trying to be kind like my mama taught me to be?" The simple question from this 8-year-old cut through all the adult complexity and social awkwardness of the situation. Victoria knelt down to Maya's level again, her expensive suit forgotten as she spoke directly to the child. "Yes, Maya. I'm trying to learn how to be kind the way you are. Do you think you could teach me?" Maya nodded solemnly, as if this were the most important responsibility she had ever been given. Being kind is easy. You just have to think about how other people feel and try to make them feel better. Like when I saw your baby crying, I wanted to help because I know how it feels to be sad. Victoria felt tears threatening to spill over as she absorbed this simple wisdom from a child who had grown up with so much less material wealth than her own daughter. But who possessed riches of spirit that Victoria was only beginning to recognize? Maria finally nodded her acceptance of Victoria's offer, recognizing that sometimes accepting help was itself an act of grace. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This is very generous." As they finished the transaction, Victoria found herself reluctant to say goodbye to this family who had somehow shifted her entire perspective in the space of a grocery store line. She watched Maya carefully place her chocolate bar in the grocery bag, already planning how she would share it later, and Victoria realized she was witnessing a masterclass in contentment and generosity. "Would it be possible," Victoria asked Maria hesitantly, "for us to stay in touch? I feel like Maya and Emma could be good friends, and I would love to know your family better." Maria exchanged a look with David, who had remained quietly supportive throughout the encounter. They were both protective of their children and wary of relationships that crossed such obvious class boundaries. But there was something genuine in Victoria's demeanor that suggested her interest went beyond superficial charity or guilt-driven gestures. "Perhaps we could meet at the park sometime," Maria said carefully. "Maya loves the playground at Riverside Elementary on Saturday mornings." Victoria nodded eagerly, already mentally rearranging her weekend schedule. "We'll be there this Saturday, if that works for you." As they prepared to leave the store, Maya ran back to Victoria and Emma one more time. "Mrs. Victoria, I hope your baby feels better soon. And maybe next time she's sad, you can remember that hugs work almost as good as chocolate." Victoria lifted Emma from the cart and found herself following Maya's advice, holding her daughter close and really feeling the weight and warmth of the small body against her chest. Emma nestled into her mother's neck with a contentment that Victoria hadn't experienced in their relationship before. "Thank you, Maya," Victoria whispered. "You've taught me something very important today." The Gonzalez family walked toward their Holder sedan while Victoria buckled Emma into her luxury SUV, but the distance between their vehicles felt less significant than it had an hour earlier. As Victoria drove home through the Seattle evening traffic, she found herself thinking not about the quarterly reports waiting on her desk, but about the profound simplicity of Maya's worldview. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep with her fever finally broken, Victoria sat in her home office staring at the city lights sprawling below her penthouse windows. She had built an empire, accumulated wealth beyond her childhood dreams, and achieved recognition as one of the most successful women in American business. But an 8-year-old girl in a grocery store had shown her something that all her achievements couldn't buy: the pure joy of giving without expectation of return. Victoria opened her laptop and began researching educational opportunities for underprivileged children in Seattle. She read about after-school programs struggling with funding, about children like Maya who showed exceptional promise but lacked resources to develop their potential. An idea began forming in her mind, not as a guilt-driven charitable gesture, but as a genuine desire to create something meaningful. By Saturday morning, Victoria found herself nervously checking her reflection before heading to Riverside Elementary playground. She had chosen casual clothes, jeans and a sweater that still probably cost more than most people's monthly clothing budget, but which felt more appropriate for a playground than her usual business attire. Emma seemed to sense her mother's excitement, babbling happily in her car seat as they drove through neighborhoods that Victoria realized she had never really noticed before, despite living in Seattle for over 15 years. The houses were smaller here, the cars older, but the sidewalks were filled with children playing and families working in their gardens, with a sense of community that was absent from her own upscale neighborhood. Maya spotted them from across the playground and came running over with the uninhibited joy that children express when they see someone they've connected with. "Mrs. Victoria! Emma! You came!" Victoria felt her heart lift in a way that no business success had ever achieved. Maya immediately began showing Emma around the playground, explaining which slides were best for little kids, and pointing out where the ducks liked to swim in the nearby pond. Emma, who was usually shy around new people, seemed to blossom under Maya's attention. Maria approached more cautiously, still uncertain about this unlikely friendship, but willing to give it a chance for Maya's sake. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Maya has talked about nothing but Emma and you all week. She's been on my mind too," Victoria admitted. "Actually, I was hoping we could talk about something. I have an idea, and I'd love your thoughts." As the children played together, Victoria shared her vision for a mentorship and scholarship program that would identify children like Maya who showed exceptional character and potential, regardless of their family's financial circumstances. She talked about creating opportunities for enrichment classes, tutoring, and eventually college scholarships, but with a focus on developing the whole child, not just academic achievement. "I keep thinking about what Maya said about kindness being simple," Victoria had explained. "She has wisdom that I want my own daughter to learn. I want to create something that nurtures that kind of character, while also providing practical support for education and development." Maria listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions about implementation and sustainability. Her background as a nurse had given her insight into the challenges facing working families, and she could see both the potential benefits and pitfalls of such a program. "The danger," Maria said carefully, "is creating dependency rather than empowerment. The families who would benefit from this kind of program, they have pride. They want to contribute, not just receive." Victoria nodded, recognizing the wisdom in Maria's concern. "What if we structured it so that families could contribute in non-monetary ways? Time, skills, mentoring other families? I don't want to create charity, I want to create community." As they talked, Victoria watched Maya patiently teaching Emma how to go down the slide safely, celebrating each small accomplishment with genuine enthusiasm. David joined the conversation, offering perspective from his experience in construction and his involvement with his union's family support programs. "The kids who struggle most," he said. "They're not struggling because they're not smart or capable. They're struggling because they don't see possibilities. When you grow up in certain neighborhoods, certain economic situations, you don't even know what opportunities exist." Victoria felt the truth of his words resonating with her own childhood memories. She had been lucky enough to have teachers who recognized her potential and pushed her toward scholarships and advanced programs, but she knew many equally talented children never received that crucial early intervention. Over the following weeks, Victoria found herself spending increasing amounts of time away from her office, visiting schools, meeting with educators, and researching best practices for youth development programs. She discovered a passion for this work that surprised her with its intensity. For the first time in years, she was excited to wake up each morning, energized by the possibility of creating something that could genuinely transform lives. Emma was thriving under the increased attention from her mother, and Victoria realized that her own childhood hunger for her mother's time and presence had been unconsciously replicated in her relationship with Emma. The irony wasn't lost on her that in trying to ensure Emma never experienced financial insecurity, Victoria had inadvertently created emotional insecurity instead. Maya and her family became regular visitors to Victoria's home, and Victoria found herself learning as much from them as she hoped to give. Maya's parents shared stories of their immigration from Mexico, their struggles to establish themselves in a new country, and their determination to provide opportunities for their children that they had never imagined for themselves. "We came here with nothing but hope," Maria told Victoria one evening as they watched the children play in Victoria's expansive backyard. "Every day, we try to build something better for our kids. Sometimes that means making sacrifices that are hard for them to understand now, but we hope they will appreciate later." Victoria thought about her own sacrifices, the long hours and relentless focus that had built her fortune but had perhaps cost her the early years of Emma's childhood. She was beginning to understand that there were different kinds of wealth, and that Maya's family possessed riches that all her business success couldn't buy. The mentorship program began to take shape as the Maya Initiative, named not as a tribute to the little girl who had inspired it, but as a reminder of the simple, profound wisdom that Maya had shared in that grocery store line. Victoria hired educators and community outreach specialists, but she insisted on remaining personally involved in the selection and development process. The first cohort of children selected for the program included 12 kids from across Seattle, chosen not just for academic potential, but for evidence of character, resilience, and the kind of emotional intelligence that Maya had demonstrated. Each child was paired with a mentor from the business community, but they also participated in group activities designed to build leadership skills and community connection. Maya, despite her age, was invited to participate in the program's design process. Victoria discovered that children often had the clearest insights into what would actually be helpful versus what adults thought would be helpful. Maya's suggestions led to the inclusion of family cooking classes, community garden projects, and peer tutoring programs that strengthened the entire community, rather than just individual children. "When you help just one person, it's nice," Maya explained, with the serious tone she used for important subjects. "But when you help people learn to help each other, then the help keeps growing like flowers in a garden." Victoria found herself documenting Maya's observations, recognizing that this 8-year-old had intuitive understanding of sustainable community development that many professional consultants struggled to grasp. She began to see her role not as a benefactor bestowing aid from above, but as a facilitator helping to amplify the existing strengths and wisdom within the community. The program's first year exceeded every expectation Victoria had dared to set. Children's academic performance improved, but more importantly, their confidence and sense of possibility expanded. Parents became more engaged with their children's education and began forming support networks among themselves. The business mentors found themselves gaining as much from the experience as they contributed. One evening, Victoria was reviewing program evaluations when she came across a note that Maya had written for her mentor, a marketing executive named Rebecca, who had become deeply invested in Maya's development. The note was decorated with careful drawings of flowers and hearts, and the message was simple. "Thank you for believing that I can do important things. Now I believe it too." Victoria felt tears spilling over as she read those words, remembering her own childhood hunger for someone to believe in her potential. She thought about all the children who never received that crucial vote of confidence, and she felt a sense of purpose that was deeper and more satisfying than any profit margin she had ever achieved. The program began attracting attention from other cities and philanthropic organizations. Victoria was invited to speak at conferences about innovative approaches to youth development and community empowerment. But the moment that meant the most to her came on a quiet Saturday morning at the playground where this all began. Maya ran up to her with excitement radiating from every pore of her 9-year-old body. "Mrs. Victoria, guess what? I'm going to start a kindness club at my school. We're going to look for kids who are sad or lonely and find ways to help them feel better." Victoria knelt down to Maya's eye level, just as she had that first day in the grocery store line. "That sounds wonderful, Maya. How did you come up with that idea?" "Well," Maya said, tilting her head thoughtfully, "you remember when I gave my chocolate to Emma because she was crying? That made me feel really good inside, like my heart was bigger than before. And then you started the program to help lots of kids, and that made your heart quack. Bigger too, right?" "Juan." Victoria nodded, amazed by Maya's ability to distill complex emotions into simple truths. "So I thought, if everyone just tries to make one person feel better each day, then pretty soon everyone would be feeling better. It's like when you throw a rock in the pond and the circles keep getting bigger and bigger." Victoria felt a profound sense of completion as she listened to Maya's words. This child who had spontaneously offered her birthday candy to a crying stranger had now developed a sophisticated understanding of how individual acts of kindness could create expanding circles of positive pasture. Change. Maya, that is the most beautiful and wise idea I've ever heard, Victoria said. Do you think there might be room in your kindness club for Emma and me? Maya's face lit up with delight. Of course! The more people we have, the more kindness we can spread around. As Victoria drove home that afternoon with Emma chattering happily in the back seat, she reflected on the transformation that had begun with a simple encounter in a grocery store line. She had approached that day, focused on her daughter's immediate medical needs, impatient with the inconvenience of waiting in line, disconnected from the lives of the people around her. Maya's spontaneous generosity had cracked open something in Victoria's heart that she hadn't even realized had been sealed shut. In the months since, she had discovered that true wealth wasn't measured in stock portfolios or real estate holdings, but in the depth of connections with other people and the impact those connections could have on expanding circles of community. The Maya Initiative continued to grow and evolve, but it never lost sight of its founding principle, that every person possessed something valuable to offer, regardless of their economic circumstances. Victoria learned to see her business success not as an end in itself, but as a tool for creating opportunities for others to discover and develop their own unique gifts. Emma grew up surrounded by children from diverse backgrounds, learning from Maya and others that friendship and respect weren't dependent on material possessions, but on character and kindness. Victoria watched her daughter develop the kind of emotional intelligence and social consciousness that couldn't be taught in exclusive private schools, but had to be learned through authentic relationships with people from all walks of life. Years later, when Maya graduated from high school as valedictorian with a full scholarship to Stanford University, Victoria sat in the audience remembering that 8-year-old girl who had offered her birthday candy to a crying stranger. Maya's graduation speech focused on the ripple effects of small acts of kindness and the responsibility that each person had to use their talents and opportunities in service of others. When I was 8 years old, Maya told the assembled crowd, I met a little girl who was crying in a grocery store, and I gave her my birthday chocolate because I wanted her to feel better. I didn't know that simple choice would change my life and the lives of so many others. I learned that kindness isn't about the size of what you give. It's about the size of your heart when you give it. Victoria wiped away tears as she listened to Maya speak with the eloquence and wisdom of someone far beyond her 18 years. She thought about the journey that had brought them all to this moment, the way a single spontaneous act of generosity had created expanding circles of transformation that touched hundreds of lives. After the ceremony, Maya found Victoria in the crowd and embraced her with the same unself-conscious warmth she had shown as a child. Mrs. Victoria, thank you for seeing something in that little girl with the chocolate bar. Thank you for helping me believe that I could do important things with my life. Victoria held Maya close, remembering the moment when this remarkable young woman had taught her that true wealth lay not in what you accumulated for yourself, but in what you were willing to share with others. Thank you, Maya, for teaching me what really matters. Thank you for showing me that the most important business I could ever build was the business of human connection and community. As the celebration continued around them, Victoria reflected on the profound truth that Maya had embodied from childhood, that we are all interconnected, that one person's pain or joy inevitably affects others, and that the simple choice to respond with kindness and generosity could create transformations that rippled far beyond anything we could imagine. The little girl who had given up her birthday candy to comfort a crying stranger had grown into a young woman who would dedicate her life to creating more kindness in the world. And the successful businesswoman who had been so moved by that gesture had discovered that her greatest achievement wasn't building a corporate empire, but nurturing a community where every child could discover their own unique potential for making the world a better place. In the end, Victoria realized, Maya had been right all along. Kindness really was simple. You just had to think about how other people felt and try to make them feel better. Everything else, all the programs and initiatives and scholarships, was just different ways of amplifying that simple, profound truth. And in a world that often seemed divided by differences in wealth, background, and opportunity. Perhaps that simple truth was the most revolutionary idea of all. But Maya's story was far from over. As she prepared to leave for Stanford, she made a request that surprised even Victoria. "Mrs. Victoria, I want to defer my scholarship for 1 year. I want to work with the Maya Initiative full-time, to help expand it to other cities before I start college." Victoria felt a mixture of pride and concern as she considered Maya's proposal. The scholarship to Stanford represented everything they had worked toward, the culmination of years of mentorship and support. Yet Maya's desire to give back immediately, to use her position to help others before pursuing her own academic goals, embodied the very principles the program was designed to foster. "Maya, are you certain about this decision?" Victoria asked during one of their regular coffee meetings, which had evolved from the playground encounters of Maya's childhood. "Stanford will hold your place, but a year is a significant commitment." Maya's response carried the thoughtful deliberation that had characterized her decision-making since childhood. "Mrs. Victoria, I've been thinking about this for months. Stanford will teach me business and economics, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. But right now, I have something more valuable than textbook knowledge. I have the lived experience of what it means to be helped and to help others. I want to use that while it's still fresh. While I still remember exactly what it felt like to be 8 years old and watching my parents count grocery money." End quote. Victoria recognized the wisdom in Maya's perspective, even as she worried about the practical implications. "What would you want to focus on during this year?" "I want to travel to communities where children face the same challenges I did, but maybe don't have the same opportunities. I want to listen to them, learn from them, and help them create their own version of what we've built here in Seattle. Not a copy, but something that grows from their own community's strengths and needs." The idea resonated deeply with Victoria, who had been receiving inquiries from organizations across the country seeking to replicate the Maya Initiative's success. But she had been cautious about expansion, knowing that what worked in Seattle might not translate directly to other communities with different demographics, challenges, and resources. "You're talking about organic growth rather than institutional replication," Victoria said, her business mind immediately grasping the sophisticated approach Maya was proposing. "Community-driven development rather than top-down implementation." Maya nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. When I gave Emma my chocolate that day, it wasn't because someone told me that was the right thing to do. It came from inside, from what felt natural and right. I think the best programs grow the same way, from what feels natural and right to the people who live in each community." End quote. Victoria found herself once again marveling at Maya's intuitive understanding of complex social dynamics. This 18-year-old possessed insights that many professional development workers struggled to internalize after years of training and experience. Within 3 months, Maya had developed a comprehensive proposal for what she called the Kindness Catalyst Initiative. Rather than establishing satellite programs in other cities, she envisioned a network of community leaders who would be trained not in specific program implementation, but in the principles of identifying and nurturing existing community strengths. "Every neighborhood has its own Mayas," she explained to the Maya Initiative Board of Directors, which now included Maria and David alongside Victoria and several business leaders. "Children who naturally care about others. Families who support each other despite limited resources. Adults who mentor informally. Our job isn't to create something new, it's to help communities recognize and build on what they already have." The board was impressed by Maya's presentation, but David raised a practical concern that reflected his background in construction project management. "This sounds wonderful in theory, Maya, but how do we measure success? How do we know if it's working?" Maya had anticipated this question, and her answer revealed months of careful thought. "Copy. When you build a house, you measure success by whether the walls are straight and the roof doesn't leak. But when you build community, you measure success by whether people feel more connected to each other, whether children feel more hopeful about their futures, whether families feel less isolated in their struggles." End quote. She pulled out a folder filled with letters and drawings from children who had participated in the Maya Initiative over the years. "Look at these. Jacob writes about how his confidence in math improved after his mentor helped him. But he also writes about how he now helps younger kids with their homework. Sophia draws pictures of her family garden, but she also draws pictures of sharing vegetables with neighbors. The academic improvements are important, but the character development, the community building, that's what creates lasting change. Victoria watched the board members' faces as they absorbed Maya's words and examined the children's artwork. She could see them beginning to understand that Maya wasn't just proposing program expansion, she was articulating a philosophy of human development that prioritized emotional and social growth alongside academic achievement. Over the following months, Maya embarked on a series of listening tours that took her to rural farming communities in Iowa, urban neighborhoods in Detroit, immigrant enclaves in Los Angeles, and Native American reservations in South Dakota. She traveled with minimal funding and maximum curiosity, staying with families, volunteering at local organizations, and most importantly, spending time with children and teenagers who were navigating challenges similar to those she had faced. In each community, Maya discovered unique strengths and innovative approaches to supporting young people. In rural Iowa, she found teenagers who had organized informal mentoring networks that connected farm kids with college-bound seniors. In Detroit, she encountered community gardens that served as outdoor classrooms where children learned everything from nutrition to conflict resolution. On the South Dakota reservation, she participated in traditional storytelling circles where elders passed on cultural wisdom while also addressing contemporary challenges like substance abuse and educational inequality. Every place I visit teaches me something new about resilience and creativity, Maya wrote in the blog she maintained to document her journey. A 12-year-old in Detroit taught me how to turn abandoned lots into learning laboratories. A grandmother in South Dakota showed me how traditional healing practices can address modern trauma. A teenage mother in Los Angeles demonstrated how peer support networks can be more effective than professional counseling services. Victoria followed Maya's travels through these blog posts and their weekly video calls, watching with amazement as this young woman continued to develop insights that challenged conventional approaches to youth development and community building. Maya's natural empathy, combined with her direct experience of overcoming obstacles, allowed her to connect with people in ways that traditional social workers and program administrators often couldn't achieve. But the most significant learning came when Maya spent 3 weeks in Appalachian communities in West Virginia, where she encountered poverty that was both similar to and different from what she had experienced in her own blonde childhood. The geographic isolation, the legacy of economic exploitation, and the cultural pride that coexisted with material hardship created unique challenges that required equally unique solutions. I met a boy named Luke who reminds me so much of myself at that age, Maya wrote after visiting a small town where the local coal mine had closed 5 years earlier. He's brilliant and curious and kind, but he's never seen anyone from his community go to college. It's not that college is impossible for him, it's that it's literally invisible. He can't imagine it because he's never seen it. Maya spent hours with Luke and his family, learning about their history in the mountains, their connection to the land, and their struggles with economic uncertainty. Luke's mother, Jennifer, worked 2 jobs to support her 3 children, but she also coordinated an informal food-sharing network that ensured no family in their small community went hungry. Jennifer has organizational skills that would impress any corporate executive, Maya observed. She manages complex logistics, coordinates volunteer schedules, navigates personality conflicts, and maintains detailed records of resource distribution. But she's never thought of these as professional skills because she's doing them in service of her community rather than for a paycheck. This insight sparked an idea that would become central to Maya's developing philosophy. What if community development programs focused not on bringing outside expertise to underserved areas, but on helping existing community leaders recognize and formalize the skills they were already using? What if the goal wasn't to extract promising young people from their communities and send them to distant colleges and careers, but to help them develop their potential while remaining connected to and invested in their home communities? Maya extended her stay in West Virginia to work with Jennifer and several other community leaders on developing what they called the Mountain Roots Initiative. Rather than focusing exclusively on getting students like Luke into college, the program would create pathways for young people to develop entrepreneurial skills, technical expertise, and leadership capacity that could be applied locally. Luke wants to study environmental science because he cares about the water quality issues that affect his community, Maya explained during a video call with Victoria. Instead of encouraging him to leave for college and potentially never return, what if we helped him develop expertise that he could use to address local environmental challenges while also creating economic opportunities for himself and others? Victoria found herself both inspired and slightly anxious about the direction Maya's thinking was taking. The original Maya initiative had been successful precisely because it had clear metrics, established partnerships with educational institutions, and measurable outcomes in terms of college enrollment and career placement. Maya's evolving vision was more complex and harder to quantify, though potentially more transformative. Maya, I admire your innovative thinking, and I want to support your vision, Victoria said carefully. But we also have responsibilities to our funders and our communities to demonstrate measurable impact. How do we balance innovation with accountability? Maya's response revealed the depth of thought she had given to this challenge. Mrs. Victoria, I think we're measuring the wrong things. We measure college enrollment, but not whether students maintain connections to their families and communities. We measure individual success, but not community resilience. We measure economic outcomes, but not emotional well-being or cultural preservation. And she paused, organizing her thoughts with the same deliberate care she had shown as a child. What if success looked like Luke becoming an environmental scientist who develops water purification systems that create jobs in Appalachian communities? What if success looked like Jennifer recognizing that her community organizing skills qualify her for leadership roles in regional development initiatives? What if success looked like young people choosing to stay in or return to their home communities because they see opportunities to make meaningful contributions there? Victoria realized that Maya was articulating a vision of success that prioritized community sustainability over individual achievement, collective well-being over personal advancement. It was a radical departure from the traditional metrics of educational and economic success, but it aligned perfectly with the values that had inspired the Maya initiative in the first place. You're talking about redefining what we mean by making it, Victoria said. Instead of success being about escaping your circumstances, success becomes about transforming your circumstances. Exactly, Maya replied with excitement. And the beautiful thing is, when you focus on community transformation, individual opportunities naturally expand too. When young people see possibilities for meaningful work and community leadership in their home areas, they're more motivated to develop the skills and knowledge that create those possibilities. End quote. Maya's year of deferred enrollment became 2 years as the Kindness Catalyst initiative expanded to include pilot programs in 12 communities across the United States. Each program was unique, developed in collaboration with local leaders and young people who understood their community's specific strengths and challenges. In Detroit, teenagers developed urban agriculture enterprises that provided fresh produce to local families while teaching business skills and environmental stewardship. In South Dakota, young people created cultural preservation programs that used digital storytelling to document elder wisdom while developing technical skills. In West Virginia, high school students partnered with environmental scientists to develop water quality monitoring systems that created both local jobs and community health improvements. Victoria watched these developments with a mixture of pride and astonishment. The shy 18-year-old who had deferred Stanford to spend a year giving back had evolved into a visionary leader whose work was being studied by universities and development organizations around the world. More importantly, Maya had remained grounded in the simple principles of empathy and connection that had characterized her childhood. The most important thing I've learned, Maya reflected, during what had become an annual celebration of the original grocery store encounter, is that sustainable change happens when people feel seen and valued for who they already are, not just for who they might become with the right intervention. Emma, now 10 years old and deeply involved in the program's youth leadership development, listened to Maya's words with the same focused attention she had shown as a toddler. "Maya, do you think that little girl in the grocery store knew she was going to change so many lives when she offered her chocolate?" Maya laughed, remembering her 8-year-old self with a combination of fondness and amazement. "I think that little girl just wanted to help a crying baby feel better. Sometimes the most important things we do start with the simplest motivations." Victoria watched this exchange between Maya and Emma, recognizing that she was witnessing the continuation of a legacy of kindness and wisdom that would ripple forward through generations. Emma was growing up surrounded by examples of young people who used their talents and opportunities to strengthen their communities, and Victoria could see that these values were becoming as natural to Emma as breathing. As Maya finally prepared to begin her studies at Stanford, now with several years of practical experience in community development to inform her academic pursuits, Victoria reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a child's spontaneous generosity in a grocery store line. The Maya initiative had grown from a single scholarship program into a network of community-driven development projects that spanned the country. But more than its geographic reach or programmatic scope, the initiative had succeeded in demonstrating that authentic change happened through relationships, not just resources, through community empowerment, not just individual advancement. "Mrs. Victoria," Maya said as they prepared for yet another goodbye, this one temporary as she headed to California for her freshman year. "Thank you for believing in a vision that didn't exist yet, for supporting an approach that couldn't be measured by traditional standards, for understanding that sometimes the most important investments are the ones that pay dividends in ways we never expected." Victoria embraced Maya with the deep affection that had grown between them over the years, remembering the moment when this remarkable young woman had first entered her life as an 8-year-old offering birthday candy to a stranger. "Thank you, Maya, for teaching me that true leadership isn't about having all the answers, it's about asking the right questions and empowering others to find their own solutions." As Maya departed for Stanford, carrying with her the wisdom gained from years of community work and the excitement of new academic challenges ahead, Victoria knew that this was not an ending, but a new beginning. The principles Maya had embodied and articulated would continue to guide the Kindness Catalyst initiative as it expanded to new communities and evolved to meet emerging challenges. And somewhere in Seattle, in Detroit, in West Virginia, and in communities across the country, children were learning that their natural impulses toward kindness and connection were not naive sentimentality, but the foundation of transformative social change. They were discovering that their own experiences of struggle and resilience qualified them to be leaders and changemakers, that their communities possessed untapped resources and wisdom, and that the simple act of caring about others could create ripples of positive change that extended far beyond anything they could imagine. The legacy of a little girl's birthday chocolate continued to grow, one act of kindness at a time.